Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om 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 Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayat Nashta Prayesh Babadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtiki. Jai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Haribol, Hare Krishna, Adi Purusha Prabhu, Dandat pranams to you of my obeisances. So let me share my screen. Okay, so here we are. We're reading from chapter 4, text 4 to 16, I believe. Yes. So let me just do the Sanskrit verse for chapter 4 and 5. Tam stam samsaya sukte dve vaishvadheve mahatmanaha tesvaryanto dhanam shatra parisheshitamatmana dashyanti te tatanarcha tata sakritavanta yatha tasmai datvaya yusvargham te satra pariseshanam. Nabhaga's father continued. So just the background. So this, what's happening here is that there was this personality called Nabhaga, who's actually the father of Ambarish Maharaj. So in his, what he went to his darshan of his guru and practiced brahmacharya for a very, very long time. And he had other brothers. And those brothers thought that because he didn't come back after a long time, they thought that he wasn't coming back. They thought that he's going to become like a Naishtika brahmachari. He's going to be there for the rest of his life. But the thing is, after some time, he did come back, and the brothers had already sort of divided. The father his father had already sort of inherited. Like given the share of all his property to all the brothers and retired. So the brothers had already divided all the property amongst themselves. So Nabhaga didn't have any share. So, to almost kind of cheat him, instead of giving him his rightful share, the brothers told him, okay, you know what? Your share is our father. He's your property. So then Nabhaga just kind of like, very simply when accepted that, and he went to his father and said, this is what happened. And then his father said, oh, my son, they're trying to cheat you. Don't be fooled by those words. He said, and then but then the father also didn't want him to, indulge in some kind of conflict with his brothers. He said, okay, in fact, to get your, your wealth, he tells him a method on exactly what to do. And that's exactly what we're going to read right now. So it starts with this verse. It says, Nabhaga's father continued, go to those great souls and describe 2 Vedic hymns pertaining to Vaishvadev. When the great sages have completed the sacrifice and are going to the heavenly planets, they will give you the remnants of the money they've received from the sacrifice. Therefore, go there immediately. Thus, Nabhaga acted exactly according to the advice of his father, and the great sages of the Angira dynasty gave him all their wealth and then went to the heavenly planets. So this is interesting here, because here the sages, Angira dynasty, Angira Muni, basically, we read the first canto of the Bhagavatam, they were in charge, Angira Muni was in charge of the Atharva Veda. Atharva Veda is mainly associated with incantations, magical formula, and so forth. So somehow, in the previous verse, he says that they are going to make some mistake in the sacrifice. So in the last few days, and what you're going to do, you're going to tell them these Vedic mantras to help them complete that sacrifice. And being pleased with you, they will let you inherit the rest of the remnants of of the wealth of the sacrifice, and then they somehow, this sacrifice is so powerful that after completing it, they're going to the heavenly planets immediately. So I think it's a very interesting form of fire sacrifice where one doesn't even have to wait for death. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Let me just go to the next verse. Okay. So in fact, I think I'm going to go back, because now something else happens. So I want to kind of just digress a little bit from the main topic, and talk about fire sacrifice. So very often we hear in the Vedic tradition, in the Puranas, Mahabharata, Ramayana, and the Bhagavatam, we hear about this great fire sacrifices, and very often in this fire sacrifices, amazing things happen. Like in the sacrifice of Maharaj Drupada, he wanted to avenge his enemy, which at that time was Dronacharya. And from the sacrifice, he got two beings, Draupadi and Drishtadyumna. So what's going on? How can we understand this? Is there something about fire sacrifices that is just too hard to believe? So this is something which I read about, and I actually read a book by Hridayanda Maharaj where he gives some insight, some his own realization on how the fire sacrifice works. So it says, just like, the idea is that Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that he is everywhere. Mai sarvam idam protam, that he exists everywhere, and everything is inside me. And anyone who sees him everywhere, sees everything basically. So Krishna says, so there is understanding of, in the Vedic philosophy, of interconnectedness, of everything is interconnected to each other, and God pervades the entire universe. So in other words, every point in space connects to every other point. Okay, the Buddhists also have this concept. They call it this interpenetration and interconnectedness. But the Buddhists don't have a concept of God. They just say everything is interconnected. So anyway, but we understand everything is interconnected because everything is part of Krishna's energy. So the fire sacrifice, when they do fire sacrifices, there are various kinds of fire sacrifices where they recreate in the sacrificial arena, like a fire sacrifice that represents the universe, or fire sacrifice that represents earth or a kingdom, and so forth. And then they are able to perform, they have the expertise to perform it in such a way that the fire sacrifice then grants them various kinds of benedictions. It grants them various kinds of whatever desires that they have. So Hridayanda Maharaj actually compares it, he's almost like the icons that we have on a computer. So just like, when we click on an icon on a computer, it leads to something else, to a website like Amazon, Amazon, the website, for example. If you want to order something online, you click on it and you pay for it. So in a very similar way, the ingredients that one offers to the fire sacrifice is also part of the sacrifice, and that becomes sort of the payment, the ingredients offered to it, and then you get something that comes out of the fire sacrifice as a result of that offering. So it's kind of like even what we're doing online electronically is actually an element of fire. Electric energy is an element of fire energy. So in that way, just like how the icons of a computer can help us, bring us to different worlds and so forth. This is in Kali Yuga system. In the previous system, the fire sacrifice served similar purpose, but that is without any bad effects. In Kali Yuga, we're using this electric energy with radiation. We do not know what else, and most people honestly use the internet for usually for at least the most widely used use of the internet is usually for bad things like pornography and all these things. But here the brahmanas, the sages, they use the fire, which is a microcosm, fire sacrifice, which is a microcosm of the entire universe, to actually enter into the heavenly planets. So any comments or questions about this particular point about the fire sacrifice? Yes, Adipurusha Prabhu.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic to talk about fire sacrifice. Um, and there's another topic, um, glorifying Krishna. How wonderful is Krishna? This devotee, he stayed with the Guru's ashram, completed his sadhana, served his spiritual master, studied the Vedas, where his brothers, they split from the ashram, ran back to divide up the wealth, you know. And Krishna is so wonderful that even though he didn't directly prioritize getting money,
Yeah.
because he stayed in the ashram and did his devotional service, he didn't minimize his sadhana.
Yeah.
Krishna, just like when Prabhupada talks about instinct, people say, how do the birds find their way to south? Instinct. No, Prabhupada, it's not instinct, it's Krishna. We can say that he was benefited. It happened that he got money. His father arranged that he got money. Lord Shiva gave him permission to get money. The sages gave him Lakshmi. But we know Sarva Karna Karna, Krishna is the cause of all causes. Krishna. And how wonderful is Krishna that he didn't prioritize getting Lakshmi, but Krishna arranged. By
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what.
Krishna arranged that he was taken care of.
Yeah, exactly. That's what Chaitanya Charan Prabhu talked about yesterday, that sometimes we do not know the results of our actions. You do something and we do not know what results. So he performed his sadhana and his spiritual activities. And although apparently he didn't get the wealth that his brothers got, Krishna arranged for him to
Yes.
eventually get it. So yeah, so that's a great point. But I'm going to come back to the point I was talking about earlier on. Does anyone have any questions or comments about the fire sacrifice issue? Okay, if not, let me go on to the rest of the verses. Um, okay, so the next part is, so I'm going to read the rest of it, and this is where I want to come to my main topic. So the next translation is, thereafter, while Nabhaga was accepting the riches, a black-looking person from the north came to him and said, all the wealth from this sacrificial arena belongs to me. Nabhaga then said, these riches belong to me. The great saintly persons have delivered them to me. When Nabhaga said this, the black-looking person replied, let us go to your father and ask him to settle our disagreement. In accordance with this, Nabhaga inquired from his father. So again, notice that Nabhaga doesn't try to fight with this black-looking person. He just states his rightful inheritance. Say, wait a minute, this belongs to me. So then the person says, let's go to your father. Okay, then he says, yeah. Then he actually agrees to it. He doesn't try to quarrel with this person. So let's see what his father says. The father of Nabhaga said, whatever the great sages sacrificed in the arena of the Daksha Yajna, they offered to Lord Shiva as his share. Therefore, everything in the sacrificial arena certainly belongs to Lord Shiva. Thereupon, after offering obeisances to Lord Shiva, Nabhaga said, O worshipable Lord, everything in this arena of sacrifice is yours. This is the assertion of my father. Now, with great respect, I bow my head before you, begging your mercy. So we see Nabhaga here, he didn't try to protest. Although he had followed the instructions of his father, he did exactly what his father said. Now again, that wealth was denied from him. But he didn't protest. He didn't stop himself from asking for what is rightfully his. But at the same time, when his father said, no, actually the sacrifice was meant for Lord Shiva and Lord Shiva has come to claim it, he completely accepted it. He was detached. He wasn't greedy. He was detached from the results of this of the wealth. He was completely detached. So this shows his great spiritual quality. So let's read on. Lord Shiva said, whatever your father has said is the truth, and you also are speaking the same truth. Therefore, I who know the Vedic mantras, shall explain transcendental knowledge to you. So here, Lord Shiva is pleased with him. He said, your father has spoken the truth, and you also speaking the truth. And therefore, because Lord Shiva is pleased, he's going to give him spiritual knowledge in return. So can you just imagine that Nabaga now actually gets transcendental knowledge, which is far, far, which far more valuable to anything that they could have even imagined by getting that material wealth that he came to actually rightfully ask for. Lord Shiva said, "Now you may take all the wealth remaining from the sacrifice, for I give it to you." After saying this, Lord Shiva, who is most adherent to the religious principles, disappeared from that place. So then Lord Shiva, Lord Shiva is the topmost Vaishnava, and he's the most, he lives, although he's Krishna gave him the appointment of being like the father of the material universe. He stays, like in the Kailash mountains, like a renounced person. So Lord Shiva is completely renounced, and he gives him back all the wealth from the sacrifice. He said, "This is for you," and then he disappears. If one hears and chants or remembers this narration in the morning and evening with great attention, he certainly becomes learned, experienced in understanding the Vedic hymns, and expert in self-realization. So this is the Phala Shruti, the fruit of this particular narration. The Bhagavatam always gives us little promises here and there. From Nabaga, Maharaj Ambarish took birth. Maharaj Ambarish was an exalted devotee, celebrated for his great merits. Although he was cursed by an infallible Brahmana, the curse could not touch him. Okay. King Parikshit inquired, "O great personality, Maharaj Ambarish was certainly most exalted and meritorious in character. I wish to hear about him. How surprising it is that the curse of a Brahmana, which is insurmountable, could not act upon him." In this last verse, I'm going to talk, it is here. Shukadev Goswami said, "Maharaj Ambarish, the most fortunate personality, achieved the rule of the entire world, consisting of 7 islands, and achieved inexhaustible, unlimited opulence and prosperity on earth. Although such a position is rarely obtained, Maharaj Ambarish did not care for it at all, for he knew well that all such opulence is material. Like that which is imagined in a dream, such opulence will ultimately be destroyed. The king knew that any non-devotee who attains such opulence merges increasingly into material nature's mode of darkness." Purport: for a devotee, material opulence is insignificant, whereas for a non-devotee, material opulence is the cause of increasing bondage. For a devotee knows that anything material is temporary, whereas a non-devotee regards the temporary so-called happiness as everything and forgets the path of self-realization. Thus, for the non-devotee, material opulence is a disqualification for spiritual advancement. So I'm going to actually focus on a little bit more on the story of Nabaga, because most of the text was on that particular story. And I want to focus on this particular quality of simplicity. So we see from Nabaga's instance, his story, that he was completely unattached. He was not afraid to ask for justice, for ask what is rightfully his. He did not hesitate to do that. At the same time, he was detached. When he did not immediately get what he wanted, he had no problem. He was obedient to his brothers, he was obedient to his father, he was obedient to Lord Shiva. And so he expressed devotion to his father, to the Brahmanas as well. He assisted them in their sacrifice. And he was also obedient to the demigods. He was respectful to the demigods. All of this pleased Krishna very much. And Krishna, specifically his simplicity, Prabhupada mentions in one of the purport that Nabaga was very simple. And simplicity is one of the 26 qualities of a devotee. So Nabaga, he displayed this quality of simplicity and spiritual, opulence. So I'm going to talk a little bit about simplicity for a while. So what exactly is simplicity? That is quite a difficult concept. Well, simplicity is ironically a complex concept to define. Like usually, sometimes in English, the word simplicity has a negative connotation. People say, "Oh, you're simple. You're simple-minded or a simpleton." So that usually refers to someone who is not very worldly wise, who is like naive, who may get cheated easily, that sort of a thing. So while that is one definition, another definition of simplicity also means someone who is not duplicitous, who is not, crooked, and someone, for example, especially in a devotional context, when they see that Krishna says, uh, "Give up all varieties of religion and surrender unto me," so they have simple faith in that. They follow it immediately. They have no doubts or questions. That their faith is simple, and they do it. Or the spiritual master gives them an instruction, and they do what the spiritual master says. They don't have any sort of duplicitous mentality, and they have no sort of any ulterior motive. They're simple-hearted. So that is another definition of simplicity. One more definition of simplicity can also mean living a simple life. It has just living with what is required, not complicating one's life with too much, extravagance. So this, like St. Prabhupada said, simple living is high thinking. So that is another kind of simplicity. Um, and another kind of simplicity can also mean, not having being complicated by too many anarthas and material desires. One a devotee can be simple in the sense that he desires only to please Krishna. So that is another kind of simplicity. So this simplicity is, Gaur Govinda Maharaj, one of the prominent, gurus coming from in ISKCON, he says that, one should have childlike simplicity. He says that is the qualification to attract Krishna's mercy. So he says childlike simplicity means that one has simple faith in the instructions of Krishna and Guru, and does that. One is not crooked. And another time he also said that childlike simplicity means that, your mind, your speech, and your heart is aligned. So what you're thinking, what you're saying, and what you're feeling is completely aligned. A complicated person, or sometimes a duplicitous person, sometimes what they're feeling or what they're thinking and what they're speaking is all going in different directions. So for example, I may think, maybe the mind is thinking, how can I exploit this person? But then the lips are trying to flatter that person, to sort of make them feel good so that you can exploit that person. So there's an example of duplicity. So duplicity is one of the hurdles for devotional service. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu does not like duplicity. It is a huge hurdle in our spiritual life. So one should give up the duplicity and associate with persons who are simple-minded. My spiritual master also said that actually simplicity is one of the childlike simplicity is one of the qualities of a very advanced Vaishnava. So it comes automatically when one is very advanced. And in fact, he has said this in reference when he's describing Gaur Govinda Swami. So the simplicity is, very, important quality to sort of aspire for. And also in the biblical tradition, Jesus, in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus actually said, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it. So even in the Bible also, there's this idea that one has to have a childlike simplicity to attain the kingdom of God. So I think someone had any questions or comments on this? Okay, Andrea Suarez, how do we develop the simple way of being without being taken advantage of in this Kali Yuga world? So again, simplicity doesn't mean that one has to be naive, but one has simple faith in Guru, Krishna, and the Shastra. So if one has that faith in Guru, Krishna, and Shastra, then the Shastra also warns us about materialistic persons. The Shastra also warns us about cheating gurus, false gurus, and all of these things as well. So one has to, absorb the knowledge of the Shastra, at the same time be simple-hearted. The most important thing is to be non-duplicitous, So even like Nabaga, he was very simple in one sense. He had this. He asked. He wasn't afraid to ask for his rightful wealth. There is a simplicity. If you look at the Bhagavatam, also Kardama Muni, he was a great devotee of the Lord, but he had this desire to get married, and he told Krishna there, and Krishna approached to him, appeared to him. So he didn't try to hide it. He didn't say, "Oh Krishna, I want." While his heart is thinking of a wife, he didn't say, "Krishna, I want pure devotion only." That was not what he said, and Krishna was very pleased with his attitude. Krishna said, "Oh, I like your truthfulness." And Prabhupada comments, how a Vaishnava should be straightforward and simple in that sense too. Does anyone have any other questions or comments you want to add? You want to add anything?
I was thinking.
This is my wife, by the way, Tulsirani.
Hi, Hare Krishna, everyone. I was thinking in terms of simplicity, that in one sense you like defined it as being straightforward.
Mhm.
Like you mentioned that example of how if someone has a material desire, they're straightforward and they're honest about, hey, Krishna, I have this desire, whatever it is. And in one sense, simplicity means to be without material desire, and in a more advanced stage of simplicity, because material desires, I feel like the nature of material desires is, like Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that lust just burns like fire. So once you get something, usually it's like, well, it's not enough. You want something else. Once you get the red convertible, then you think, well, but I need bigger seats and a hot chip to put in the car, and all kinds of things. So it's like our material desires are it's like never enough. But at the same time, one level of simplicity is to just be straightforward and honest about material desires, because we're having the discussion on, whether one has to be a pure devotee to actually be completely simple. And I think your example is that there's different levels of simplicity, just like there's different levels of pure devotion.
Yeah, excellent. That's great. So, so even at the sadhaka stage, at the practicing stage, one can be simple by being honest with where one's at, by being honest with your own shortcomings and so forth, and not acting in a way in such like even to deceive other people about their own like spiritual status, being honest about it. But also simplicity, like what you said, it is actually one of the 26 qualities of a perfected devotee. That means it's actually the qualities of the soul, a soul which is no longer conditioned by the three modes of nature. So in other words, along with all the other 25 qualities, those are actually natural inherent qualities of the soul that right now we all have that, but there's that we have been covered over by the modes of material nature. So that's exactly like what you said, so in that stage, simplicity means not having any more material desires and anartha. So there's a range of what simplicity actually means.
I think in reference to the person's question, someone just asked a question about, how do you remain simple in the material world when people are so complicated and trying to take advantage of your simplicity? I think it's an excellent question. And you mentioned how simplicity means not being naive at the same time. And I think you can look for the example, or look for the answer in the example of Srila Prabhupada, that he wouldn't let people take advantage of him. He would be very strong and he would stand his ground. I think, like he would be straightforward about things. If someone was trying to take advantage of him, he would straightforwardly shut them down.
Exactly. That's a perfect example. I was also specifically thinking of the incidents, the pastime of Prabhupada getting the Juhu temple, where someone was trying to cheat him, and he knew it. He could see the scam. So he didn't allow himself to get cheated. At the same time, he was upfront about it, straightforward about it. What's happening, and he fought to the nail for the sake of Krishna. To secure that temple.
Because he just had the simple desire to have a nice temple for Krishna.
Yeah. So, any other comments, questions about this point of simplicity?
Well, there's a great question she asked. The scriptural reference, again, a biblical reference. The Lord says, "I send you out like sheep among wolves. Be as gentle as a dove, but as wise as a serpent."
Well,
Right. So we have to deal with these, tricky and devious people, and so, but we're not selfish about it. And then how do you do that? She's asking, well, how do you do it? How do you be as gentle as dove and wise as serpent? Know how to apply this principle, and we know it's all based on desire. If we want to do what Krishna wants, and we're detached, I want it this way, I don't want it that way. We don't have any attachment or aversion, and everybody's free to desire. Krishna, I want to be right in the center of your will. You know, I'm in this situation, you know, uh, Krishna told Jesus, let them kill you. Because he told David and Goliath, kill that big giant, So if we're ready to allow Krishna to kill us or kick us or embrace us, and we have that desire, then Krishna will help us navigate all the different complex situations. How to live a simple life in a complicated world. Bhadarayana Prabhu has this song. And it's a challenge, but Krishna will help us. And without Krishna, it's impossible. So we say, Lord, what do you want me to do? I'm not sure what to do in this situation, but I'll do whatever you want.
mm,
Simple life,
yeah.
Simply prema pum artha mahan, simply love of God. Everything else falls in place. Seek first the kingdom of God, all else will follow. And the story about Nabaga, we can follow his example that there's a temptation, especially like maybe we go in a preliminary stage as a brahmachari in spiritual life. We live in the temple. We strictly go to the morning program. We chant all arounds. We do service all day. And then sometimes when we get change of ashram, I can't go to the temple every day. Oh, I can't channel my rounds. Oh, I don't have to follow all the principles all the time. So that's the tricky part, where he prioritized guru sadhana, and everything else was there for him. So we don't have to be distracted into we need money. We have to have economic development. Don't worry about that. That will come by Krishna's grace. Take care of. Jesus told his disciples, go and preach. Don't worry about where you're going to sleep. Don't worry about what you're going to eat. Don't worry about what you're going to wear. Don't worry about, don't bring a bag of money, but preach and you'll be provided for.
Yeah, in fact, that's kind of Nabhaga's story. He comes from is living the brahmachari ashram, then he comes back, and then he realizes all his inheritance has been taken away. But and he asks for it. It's not that he does nothing. He goes to his father and says, "What happened? Is this correct?" And then his father gives him some instruction, and he follows that instruction, and he gets blessed by the Lord, by Lord Shiva, and ultimately, he becomes spiritually enlightened too. Not only does he get material wealth, but more importantly, he gets spiritual wealth because of his great behavior, and that kind of leads down to the next part, like what you said, also leads to the next part about Ambrish Maharaj, the introduction to Ambrish Maharaj, how he had all of these opulences, vast opulences, just totally uncommon. And yet he was not attached to them because he could see that all of this is temporary, so and because usually he sees, the materialist people can become enamored by all this material opulence. Ambrish Maharaj, he was, although he had so much opulence, he was not at all attracted to that. And Athena has written something here: live for Krishna. Simplicity means to live for Krishna and be absorbed in Krishna. Yeah, nice. Beautiful comment. Any other thoughts, questions, or comments, or corrections on this topic of simplicity?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, what do we do about the complexities that our own anarthas create in our lives, our own material may want to have a simple desire to just focus on loving and serving Krishna as the servant of the servant of the servant, but then our conditionings make things so complex for us. So what do we do as aspiring devotees to help our hearts and our minds to become more simple when we struggle with the complex nature of our conditioned minds?
Yeah. So if I'm understanding you correctly, it is about, what do you do if you want, if you have these material desires coming into you while you want to achieve Krishna, love for Krishna. Is that a question, more or less?
Yeah. Well, how do you keep your heart simple and focused on just loving and serving Krishna?
Well, I think, like what I said earlier, part of simplicity is to acknowledge, to acknowledge yourself, your mind, acknowledge that these desires are there in the mind, and to present it, like the Bhagavatam actually gives some remedies for that. They're going to present it to Krishna, akama sarva kamo va, that they present it to the Lord, and let the Lord take care of it. Um, that's how it answers the question. Yeah. And also, it's good to also, because the different stages of our life, there are different desires that come in, and some of these desires are part of the natural process of human being. Therefore, the Vedic system as the varnashram dharma, to help you fulfill those desires in a dharmic way, in a way that's related to serving Krishna, without being implicated, like brahmacharya, grahastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas. So, and according to those ashrams, there are different things, different duties and different services that one has to do, so that is also, for example, like in the one of the duties of a son is to be obedient and devoted to the father, just like Nabhaga was. He when he had the when he had that problem, he went to his father and he obeyed his father on at least two occasions. So this is very attractive to Krishna. We shouldn't think that just because we are devotee of Krishna, we can neglect some of our duties and services. And I'm going to read to you, for example, what Krishna says about taking care of parents. This is from the Krishna book. This is on the chapter called Krishna Recovers the Son of Uddhava. So son of his teacher. Sorry, Krishna recovers son of his teacher. This is Krishna speaking to Vasudeva and Devaki after he had killed Kamsa, and then he's meeting the Vasudeva and Devaki again after a long time. So he's saying, Krishna said, unfortunately, being ordered by our fate, we could not be raised by our own parents to enjoy childhood pastimes at home. My dear father and mother, a man cannot repay his debt to his parents, from whom he gets this body, which can bestow upon him all the benefits of material existence. According to the Vedic injunctions, this human form of life enables one to perform all kinds of religious activities, fulfills all kinds of desires, and acquire all kinds of wealth. So here Krishna tells, actually, this human form of life, one can do all of these things through this body, and he even says fulfill all kinds of desire, all kinds of wealth. So Krishna is saying that he's talking about, this, how the different stages of varnashram dharma helps you perform these various activities. And only in this human form is there every possibility that one can get liberation from material existence. This body is produced by the combined efforts of the father and mother. Every human being should be obliged to his parents and understand that he cannot repay his debt to them. If after growing up a son does not try to satisfy his parents by his actions or by an endowment of riches, he is surely punished after death by the superintendent of death and made to eat his own flesh. If a person is able to care for or give protection to his old parents, a chaste wife, children, the spiritual master, the brahmanas, and other dependents, but does not do so, he is already considered dead, although he's supposedly breathing. So I hope that there's no higher authority than Krishna. So I want to make that clear. This is Krishna speaking. So let us not try to argue against what Krishna is saying. This is Krishna's words, and a simple person will accept it simply.
But I'm still going to argue with you because it is my duty as a wife to argue with you. Because in this place, Krishna is saying that
Yeah.
it is a duty to satisfy the parents. But if because I happen to take birth into a materialistic family, to satisfy my parents would mean becoming very materialistic, because that's what they want from me.
No, he doesn't say satisfy the material desires. He says to care for and give protection to them.
Okay.
He doesn't say that you should do everything that they tell you, especially if they give you something which is not in line with Shastra. You don't have to do it, But the way I see it, what the devotional service means pleasing Krishna. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean only distributing books or something. So what if just the stage of life where you have to do this to please Krishna, you have to do it. Okay, so sometimes in devotional service, we look at the externals. This is something I was discussing with someone the other day. So one person may be distributing books or preaching, and another person may be petting his dog. But the person who's distributing books or preaching is thinking, oh, I'm doing this because I want to I want to be popular in the devotee community. I want to get name and fame. But the person who's petting his dog is thinking, oh, this is Krishna's, this is Krishna's child. This is Krishna's energy. Living this jiva belongs to Krishna. So I want to show it, some care and affection because this belongs to Krishna. So the question comes, who is spiritual and who is not spiritual? So we have our understanding of what pleases Krishna should be broadened to not only what we think is conventional activities.
I think the dog petting analogy is actually a really good example of simplicity. Just simply that you get that the book distributor in the example that you gave, not necessarily that all distributors.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not at all saying that.
The example that you gave is of a book distributor who has duplicitous motives, and someone petting a dog, seeing that dog as Krishna's, little jiva.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it's if we just get too wrapped up in just doing varnashram dharma, then we can lose the opportunity of the human form of life, and miss the opportunity to simply focus on loving and serving Krishna. So I think it's important to have a good balance of both, of doing your duty and at the same time keeping that focus, because without associating with simple-minded people, then who have that simple focus of loving and serving Krishna. That's why it's one of the duties of the grihasta to serve the sannyasis, the great souls.
Yeah, no, so our acharyas talk about Daivi Varnashram Dharma. So that includes, the main portion of the Varnashram Dharma means hearing and chanting about Krishna. And because we cannot do it all the time, we also work for Krishna. That's Prabhupada's, gift to us. Because we don't have the qualification to always hear and always chant. Then we also, engage. We work for Krishna as well. And so forth. That includes working for Krishna. Also includes taking care of the parents that he gave us, the family that he gave us, and so forth.
Mataji is asking two super excellent questions. Fantastic. One of them about how do you change from your position of having some material desires to a purified form. And what does scripture say? Shrunvatamas Bhakata Krishna Punya. That a person who listens to the Bhagavatam, the Supreme Lord, cleanses the material desire from the heart for one who relishes his message. So coming to the Bhagavatam is effective. It purifies our desire, changes our desire. The other question he was asking about, what do you do? We owe your parents. And what does Shastra say? What does Shastra say? It says that we owe the sun god, we owe the rain god, we owe our parents, we owe our ancestors. And it says, there's no way you could repay that debt for all these different demigods and to your parents unless you fully surrender to Krishna, and then everything else is taken care of. At least those are two quotes from Shastra that seem to satisfy those perfectly good questions, right?
Yeah, thank you for adding that. And that's excellent. That's part of that's actually the central focus of the Srimad Bhagavatam. This complete surrender to Krishna. Satisfies all the debts we owe to our forefathers, to the demigods, to the in great sages as well. So that is there, you know. But at the same time, I also quoted Shastra by saying Krishna says that you should take care of your parents. So part of surrendering to Krishna means, in this case, at least, you know, in this particular context, means following his instruction, which is to, you know, to give protection if you're able to. He said, if you're able to do it, you should. So that is also part of surrendering to Krishna. Thank you very much. So, running out of time. Hare Krishna.
Wonderful class. We love you guys. Hare Krishna. I think it's time for Deity Darshan.
Thank you so much. Such a wonderful discussion and session. Haribol.
Krishna.